in July, so I got to know a little bit more about his work, and I think it's really quite interesting. And he says he's passionate about pediatric nutrition and working with children in general. So I'm sure that we're going to have a very interesting presentation. It's about asthma in the young children in the Mpumalanga district. And Rodney, I think I'll give you about 35 to 40 minutes so that we leave some time for questions. I'll give you a warning when you've got about 5 minutes left. Is that okay?
Yes, that's okay, Prof.
I think if you can just take off your put on your camera so that everybody can see who they're talking to.
Oh.
Just for a minute.
Yes. I don't know if I'm visible. This is
you've got the light behind you. If you can move a little bit to your left.
Just like this.
Now we can see you a bit better. No, that's great. Okay. So now if you'd like to go ahead, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Should I leave the camera
on? It's up to you.
For me, I'm not used to it, but how do usually people, when they present, how do they do it? Do they leave their camera on, or they switch it off? It depends on
their data. I think maybe switch it off, and then when you answer questions, then you can put it on.
I'll switch it on. Oh, okay, yeah. No, thank you.
Nosipo, can you mute, please? Thank you very much. All right, so let's hear from Rodney now. Rodney, can you, that's it, yeah. I was going to say put it into show. That's great. Go ahead, then.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity to share my research with you. So my topic is prevalence of asthma and its symptoms among rural and urban preschoolers in Mpumalanga province of South Africa. So my overview, basically, I'll do an introduction, I'll go through my methods, I'll discuss my results, we go through discussions, what other studies have found, and I'll give a good brief conclusion. So with regards to the prevalence of preventable asthma is increasing worldwide. That is what also drew interest for me into looking into asthma, because the prevalence has been increasing, while children remain one of the most affected group with a prevalence of 14%. So asthma have a huge implication on the quality of life and disability of the affected individuals. Mostly here, what we're talking about is like mostly if these children have asthma or they're ill, they tend to miss school or crèche or classes. Therefore, the opportunity for education is a bit limited. And also on the economic side of things, parents are missing work to take these children to hospital, and most often they are hospitalized, and most of the time the parents have to be with them in the hospital. So in all, if these children are healthier, the economy will tend to run better because their parents will tend to stay at work and be more productive. But the more these children get sick, then the parents will have to take care of them, and the economy will suffer a bit because the parents will have to contribute towards the economy. So preventable asthma and its risk factors receive insufficient attention, and it is under-recognized, under-diagnosed, and under-treated in most instances. So there was a need to ascertain the prevalence of asthma and its symptoms among rural and urban preschoolers in Mpumalanga province of South Africa, because also we really didn't know how asthma affects the children there with the background of the information that we had. So this will aid in achieving the Sustainable Development Goal. That is goal number 3, which is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all children, which is what we ultimately want to do. So the methods, study design and settings, it was an analytical cross-sectional survey. So data was collected between the period of November 2020 to April 2021. So we used purposive sampling to select Gersebane district municipality with the aim or the main reason for why we purposively selected it. It is a Highveld priority area, which is, it is associated with very poor air quality and elevated criteria pollutants, which is mainly contributed from the industrial and non-industrial sources, which makes it an area of interest to go and see how this pediatric population are doing with regards to asthma as one of the respiratory or chronic respiratory diseases. So the industry found they mainly of power generations, your ESCOMs, they're mainly there, your petrochemicals, that's where your petrochemicals, that's where your Sasol are based, metallurgy companies, open cast mining for your coal, and also a little bit of gold to a certain extent. So these also are the reasons why we chose it, because we know that then the risk factors for this respiratory diseases or asthma in specific are quite prevalent. Then we'll want to know how these children are doing in terms of their health. So this is a map just showing how Gersebane district municipality is. So it has 7 local municipalities which are highlighted in yellow. I'm not very good with colors, but I think it's anything closer to yellow. So we've got Dipaliseng, we've got Govenbeki, we've got Likwa, we've got Pixley, Kasame, Mkonto, and we've got Albert Luduli. So with it, Gersebane, it is bordered to the north by Nkangala and Enhlazeni, bordered to the south by KwaZulu-Natal and the Free State province, to the east by the formerly known as Swaziland, Eswatini, and the west by Gauteng province. So that is how it is situated. So the study population, we looked at preschoolers 1 to 8 years of age, living and attending rural or urban preschool in Mpumalanga, Gersebane district municipality. So the total number of preschoolers in Gersebane district municipality was 13,485 as estimated by the Gersebane database by then, before COVID happened. That was the data that we were working with as a round number. So sample size estimation, we use proportional stratified sampling just to make sure that we try and get a representative from both the urban and the rural area population. The resulting required total sample was 3,900 at a response rate of 70%. So we used a study power of 80% at a level of 5% significance. So this just tells us that the level, the 80% significance basically is saying that we need a particular number to be able to correctly reject or fail to reject the hypothesis, therefore, or what we're investigating. Then anything below that, then we are most likely not to get accurate results. So that's how we come up with the 3,900. Sampling procedure, we use the probability sampling design just to make sure that all the preschoolers stand a chance to be selected in the study. So a map of Gersebane district municipality was used to determine the location of the 7 sub-districts. So the map of each sub-district aided in the division of the creches into 4 main area, which is like we divided them into the north, south, west, and the east area. a representative of the scratches from each of the 4 areas within the sub-district were then selected. The selected preschoolers were then given a participant information leaflet to invite their parents to be part of the study. So those parents would then give the assent and the consent form or signed thereof, were then invited, or we send out the parent completed questionnaire, because we were also limited or looking at the COVID-19 restrictions, and people were very worried about contact and interviews that could not be possible by then. Then we had to do a parent completed questionnaire. Sampling tools. So we use an adapted international study of asthma and allergies in children questionnaire, like in simple terms, we usually refer to as the Isaac questionnaire. So it is the parent completed questionnaire. It obtains information from the child's parent or the caregiver, or basically the person who knows more about the child, how they do on their day-to-day life, so that they can give precise information. The adapted questionnaire mainly asks questions on wheezing, asthma, and/or asthma symptoms, and cough. The questionnaire was divided into 2 sections, namely demographic data and the health outcomes that we are mainly interested in. So the questionnaire was in English, as initially before COVID, we were going to do an interview, a research interview based research. Then COVID changed everything. We're just going to also have interpreters who are going to help us with interpreting the different languages that were within the 7 local sub-district. Then we ended up just leaving the questionnaire as English. Then we were thinking the translators will help, but in that regard, COVID happened. Then the questionnaire just went on in English language. Study tools. So the core questions on asthma were: has your child ever had wheezing or whistling in the chest at any time in the past? Has your child had wheezing or whistling in the past 12 months? How many attacks of wheezing has your child had in the past 12 months? In the past 12 months, how often on average has your child sleep been disturbed due to wheezing? In the past 12 months, has wheezing ever been severe enough to limit your child's speech to only 1 or 2 words at a time between the breath? So also, has your child ever had asthma? So that's where most of this term usually it's going to play a lot. We're going to refer to it as ever asthma. It's because we're asking, have a child ever had asthma, being diagnosed with asthma before? Was the child's asthma diagnosed by a medical doctor or a nurse? In the past 12 months, has your child's chest ever sounded wheezy during play or after playing? And the last one, in the past 12 months, has a child had a dry cough at night apart from the cough associated with the cold or chest infection? Data processing and analysis. Data was entered into Epidata version for quality assurance and exported into Stata 17 for all statistical analysis. Quantitative data such as age was described by means, median, standard deviation, minimum and maximums. Quantitative data such as sex was summarized in frequency or contingency tables as counts and percentages. Observation marked as not recorded were set as missing data. So this resulted in each question having a slightly different sample size, because if it's missing, then Stata wouldn't really include that individual or that person, then it just automatically throws them out. A bivariate analysis was performed between some demographic data such as suburbs, family history, if the parents have had asthma or any respiratory diseases, and also the dependent variables that we're looking at that mostly I've just gone through. Chi-square test or Fisher-Exact test was used to assess the association between categorical variables. Multiple logistic regression analysis was performed for the confounding variables related to asthma or asthma symptoms, which is like wheezing, cough, and wheeze, with the independent variables that show statistically significant value in the bivariate analysis. So we also used the level of association with the dependent variable was quantified using the odds and the confidence interval thereof. So the results, description of study participants. So we selected 3,900 preschoolers and we invited their parents through participant information leaflets to be part of the study. So 3,145 gave assent for their children and consented to participate in the study. So the participation rate was, or the response rate thereof was 80.6%, which is good. It's much higher than what the response rate was expected to be. Okay, a shortfall of 733 participants was due to unwillingness to participate, mainly because of COVID-19 concerns. People were more worried because this is, it has two phases, because they were scared of face-to-face, and others mainly also raised the reason of they don't want strangers to be visiting their house, because on the follow-up, we're going to be doing home visit when we're assessing the environment as to how these children are living and so forth. So most people were not comfortable with that aspect of research, hence they say they don't want to be part of it. So preschoolers' mean age was 4 years, 5 months. So the standard deviation of 1.22. So this simply means that the lower the standard deviation is, the more closer the data is closer to the mean, then the higher it is, the further it is, or more varied or more dispersed to what the population mean is. Most preschoolers were within the age range of 3 to 5 years, which fell within the 50th percentile, the same thing that I've already alluded to. It was almost following the bell curve shaped. Males were 51%, which is 1,605, while female were 1,540, which is almost 48.9%. So there was not much difference between male and females. The majority, which is 75% of the preschoolers, resided in the rural area, while 25% were residing in the urban area. Prevalence of ever asthma and its symptoms in rural and urban areas. So the overall prevalence of ever asthma was 66 individuals who, out of 2,810, which is almost 2.3% at a prevalence rate. So 54 out of 66 preschoolers asthma diagnosis were either by a medical doctor or a nurse. The overall prevalence of wheezing or whistling in the chest at any time in the past was 467 out of 3,084, which is almost 15.1%. So a table below summarizes the findings. So I will just sum up those which were significant. So the main thing that we were looking at, it was ever asthma and the symptom which included the wheezing and the whistling. So ever asthma was the prevalence of it in urban and rural area. It was significant, the difference there of how these individuals were affected was significant, as the rural preschoolers were more affected as compared to the urban area preschoolers, and that difference in the prevalence rate was significant. The p-value was less than 0.005. So they, in terms of ever asthma in females and males, so in terms of its rate, how it affected them, there was no significant difference. So there was no difference whether you're male or female that affected how ever asthma would affect you. There was no statistical difference thereof. So when it comes to ever asthma in terms of the age group, did it affect children differently? There was just a slight difference when it comes to children who were less than 3 years, but the difference thereof was not significant. Then we look at this asthma symptoms, which is like a wheeze and wheezing. So how it affected the urban and the rural, there was a huge difference, and that difference was statistical significance, as it affected the trend continued. It affected more of rural children as compared to the urban children. When it come again to gender, there was no really difference as to these wheeze symptoms or wheezing symptoms or asthma symptoms were more prevalent in females as compared to the males. Then when it comes to age group, wheezing and wheezing, it was significant across all the ages on how it affected these preschoolers, as it was, the prevalence was more higher in the rural children as compared to the urban children. So now we go through some of the symptoms that the question on the symptoms. So the questionnaire included questions on the risk factors for asthma and its symptoms. So these questions on the risk factors included: how long has the child lived in the area? Was the child born in the area? How the child commute to school? Was the child ever breastfed? What is the type of house and number of rooms that they have? What type of fuel is used for cooking and heating? Do they own any pets? The family history in terms of health, have they ever had some of the health respiratory diseases that are related to asthma? So this table summarizes the risk factors that were positive on the bivariate, or those that showed significant association in the bivariate analysis. Then I took them, then compiled or developed a model and throw them into a multiple logistic regression. So the unadjusted odd ratio shows those ones which were significant. So then we try to look as to, when we do adjust for the confounders, which risk factors still contribute to asthma ever in these children. So the ones highlighted in bold are the ones that even after adjusting remained as a risk factor, which mainly it was engaging in a vigorous physical activity. Children who engage in vigorous physical activity were most likely to have asthma, and they were almost 3 times more likely to develop asthma as compared to those ones who engage or who engage occasionally or do not engage at it at all. So the other ones, they lost significance when we adjusted for the confounding factors, but before an adjustment, having a female parent with bronchitis was a risk factor for one to have ever asthma. Your location, living in urban area, was a risk factor for developing or having ever asthma, the same having a dog in your house was a risk factor for you to have asthma. Almost you were 2 times most likely to have asthma as compared to those who did not own any dog. When it comes to how one commutes to school also, like those who used mostly combination of taxis and their own cars were most likely to have asthma as compared to those who just walk to school. Then we move on to the regression, multiple logistic regression for the asthma symptoms, the wheezing or whistling in the chest at any time in the past. The same here, I did a bivariate analysis, those which were positive, then I put them on the unadjusted odd ratio. Then after adjusting for confounding factors, then those ones which remain significant are highlighted in bold. So those are the ones that will just put more attention to. So the same here, also in terms of its asthma symptoms, engaging in vigorous physical activity. If you did engage in it or more, you were almost 2 times most likely to have wheezing or experience wheezing or whistling symptoms than those ones who don't engage at it at all. Then also those who used Panado antibiotics in the previous 12 months. So you were almost 3 times most likely to experience the wheezing or whistling as compared to those ones who never used a Panado or antibiotics in the previous 12 months. And the other factor which remained significant was smoke exposure at home during the past 30 days. So here what was happening is like the more exposed the child was to smoking, then their chances increased drastically, like from 1, then they'll increase to, from a factor of 1.7, then it will increase to a factor of 3.3, most likely to get whistling or wheezing as compared to those who are never exposed to smoking. And the last factor was also having a male parent who smoke. So you were most likely almost 1.5 times most likely to get a wheezing or whistling symptom if your male parent smoked than if they didn't smoke at all. So we move on to discussion. Prevalence of asthma and its symptoms. So the overall prevalence of ever asthma and whistling were 2.3 and 15.1% respectively. So a study by Zhu et al. Reported a similar overall asthma prevalence of 2.8%, while Chakravarthy et al. Reported a prevalence of 5% diagnosed asthma. Vermester and colleagues reported a slightly higher prevalence of 7.7% in 1998, 8.1% in 2003, and 8.5% in 2008. As for wheezing or whistling, Vieira et al. Indicated that wheezing was 67.2% at any time in Brazilian children. So the difference in the prevalence rate may be attributed mainly to the age group studied and the period lived in this area. So the study that investigate a similar age group and children who lived in the area for more than 6 months reported almost a similar prevalence rate. So this was also just a trend within the study that I looked at, that if they were within the same age group, then they've lived in that area for more than 6 months, then the prevalence rate were almost similar. So results of this study demonstrate that there was a lower prevalence of ever asthma in urban preschoolers, which is 1%, compared with rural preschoolers. Furthermore, the prevalence of ever wheeze or wheezing and whistling was also lower in urban preschoolers as compared with the rural preschoolers. So rural preschoolers were more affected in this regard. So contrary to our study findings, Chakravarthy et al., Wema et al., and Feng et al. Reported a higher prevalence rate of asthma in urban children as compared to rural children. So it is evident from the above findings that urban preschoolers were less affected by ever asthma and its symptoms. So this may be due to environmental exposure. As Strada et al. Reported that children experience factors exclusive to location that influence asthma and development and outcome. This is mostly the rural one. So the author here says that children in the rural area, their exposure is quite different as compared to the urban one. So the level of exposure might be the one that really maybe makes the prevalent slightly higher as compared to the urban one. So the reason for a lower prevalence of ever asthma and its symptoms in urban area preschoolers is unclear. So conditions in urban areas thrive with potential modifiable environmental exposure that can influence asthma, both in terms of the prevalence and morbidity. Our study findings are not supported by many studies in the literature, as urban children are said to be often exposed and sensitized to multiple risk factors for asthma and its symptoms. And the same if we do throw in the hygiene hypothesis that at least if you are exposed to some harmful environment, you might develop sort of immunity to it as to when you are in, for instance, a more cleaner environment where you are not exposed to any possible harmful agent that might strengthen your immune system. So in both rural and urban areas, gender difference did not play a significant role. So this is contrary to most study findings in gender differences in asthma and its prevalence, as males are consistently being reported to have more prevalent wheeze and asthma than females. So age group difference did play a significant role in the study in the prevalence of wheezing or whistling in both rural and urban preschoolers, but not in ever asthma. The age group between 3 and 5 years were most affected, which was almost 55%, followed by the age group which were greater than 5 years, which amounted to 30%. A study by Mirabelli and colleagues, which focused on age of asthma onset and reporting of any asthma symptoms, found that 45.8% of 1 to 4 years and 49% of children more than 5 years were more likely to report asthma symptoms at these respective ages. So the study findings differ slightly from our study findings, and the main reason might be due to recall bias, as Mirabelli and colleagues found or focused mostly on adults with active asthma and not children. Then it might have been difficult for them to correctly recollect as to at which ages did they really start to experience asthma, because now they are adults. That memory might have been altered or disturbed in some way. So risk factors for ever asthma and its symptoms in rural and urban area. So factors such as how a child gets to school, a child engaging in vigorous physical activity, having cats or dogs at home, children playing with them, having a female parent with a history of bronchitis, have asthma, or a male parent who smoke and smoke exposure at home during the past 30 days, use of Panadol and antibiotics in the past 12 months, and location, which is your rural and urban areas, were significant risk factors for ever asthma and its symptoms in this population group of preschoolers. So this we have already highlighted in table 2 and table 3. So of these factors, children engaging in vigorous physical activity, use of Panadol and antibiotics, having dogs and cats, and also female parents with ever asthma and smoke exposure at home in the past 30 days, and male parents who smoke remain significant in the final model after adjusting for possible confounders. So from the above factors, the factors that have the greatest potential to be modified to prevent ever asthma and wheezing or wheeze in the chest are engaging in vigorous physical activity, and also pet ownership and care, and smoke exposure at home. So these are the factors that we can look at and try and influence policy and be more practical on how we can try and prevent this. In our study, having a female parent with ever asthma or bronchitis was strongly associated with a child having wheeze or whistling in the chest. So Dong and colleague corroborated our findings as they reported that parental atopy increased the risk of asthma diagnosis and asthma-related symptoms. Furthermore, Struck et al. Concurred with the above findings as they found that parental asthma was associated with a physician diagnosis of asthma in children. Smoking exposure at home and male parents who smoke was significantly associated with a child having wheezing or whistling in the study. Wang et al. Reported that secondhand smoking or smoke exposure was significantly associated with wheeze symptoms in children. Furthermore, Tabuchi et al., Haju et al. Concurred with the above findings as they found that there was an increase in odds of having asthma exacerbation, and risk of asthma attacks for children whose father and mother both smoked compared to children with non-smoking parents. Zhang and colleagues concluded that the prevalence of respiratory symptoms increased in children exposed to parental smoking as compared to children with non-smoking parents.
Rodney, if you can just wind up now.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Okay, so our study findings show that children who engage in vigorous physical activity long enough to make them breathe hard were more likely to have ever asthma, wheezing or whistling in the chest. So contrary to our study finding, Pike and colleague found that neither has ever received a diagnosis of asthma nor current asthma was associated with moderate to vigorous physical activity. There is a paucity of studies that investigated vigorous physical activity as a risk factor for asthma and its symptoms in preschool children. So most of the studies that are done in physical activity, they are done already on children with asthma as to how capable are they in terms of them performing a physical activity due to the fact that they do have asthma, but not investigating a physical activity as a risk factor. So therefore, it is difficult to conclude on the reason for different outcomes between these two studies. The use of Panadol or antibiotics in the past 12 months was significantly associated with wheezing or whistling in the chest. So these study findings are corroborated by Amar, Desar et al., Droste et al., Khalidon et al., and Yoshida et al., as they concluded that children treated with antibiotics in the first 3 years of life are more likely to develop asthma. Having dogs or cats inside the house in the past 12 months was significantly associated with ever asthma and wheezing or whistling in the study. Dong et al. And Yanel et al. Concurred with our study findings as they reported that pet exposure in the first year of life and currently having animals in the household were related to a significantly higher prevalence of doctor-diagnosed asthma and asthma-related symptoms in children. So, in conclusion, the study findings from this study show that there was a lower prevalence of ever asthma in urban preschoolers compared to rural preschoolers, and this trend continued forever wheezing or whistling, as there was also a lower prevalence rate in urban preschoolers as compared with rural preschoolers. Of the risk factors tested, physical activity, smoking exposure, and behavior had the greatest potential for modification. Therefore, more effort can be placed on alleviating or preventing these risk factors. Thank you for listening.
Well, I think we can give Rodney some applause for this, some virtual or real applause for his presentation. And I think if anybody now has some questions, Rodney is ready to take them. I can see that his work has come a long way since we worked in the writing retreat, and even since he's preparing a journal article for publication. I think even between the draft I saw of that and this, he has moved a long way. So Rodney, maybe just take your screen down and maybe leave it up. Just take it off play in case there are some questions related to specific slides. We'll just leave it up for now.
Okay.
Okay, I'm opening up to the audience for any questions you might have. I certainly wrote down quite a lot of questions that I have. Who am I looking at?
Hi,
Christine.
hi, Maris.
Oh, Joanna.
Yes, it's me.
Okay, go ahead and ask, and then I'll move to Christine.
Okay, thanks, Rodney, for such an interesting presentation. I have one or two questions related to that. Firstly, how does the mode of transport predispose the preschoolers to asthma? And secondly, what is the location of the industries in those areas? Are they close to the urban areas or to the rural areas? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first question is, how does the transport mode affect children? So as the cars have combustion, they do burn petrol and gas. So those tend to pollute the air that we breathe. So that tend to precipitate or be a potential risk factor for asthma or asthma symptoms. Have that makes some sense. So yes.
Still on that, was there any study to justify that, to say that given any mode of transport, the combustion by that particular car can cause asthma?
Not necessarily. Most studies that support these findings is that as just traffic related. Those who have more exposure to, like, it does not necessarily, but it will go like you go and ask individuals as to, for instance, how do you commute to work? Then you'll have a group who use, for instance, a bus and a taxi. Then you'll have, I'm just giving an example, a group who use a bicycle, and a group who, for instance, they just walk to work. Okay. Then most studies find that those who most likely walk to work or maybe take a bicycle are less likely to experience asthma as compared to those ones who use motor cars, taxis, and buses. I think that's how the studies that have been done are are reporting it. I don't know if it answers the
Thank
question.
you. Yes.
Okay.
So
So
do
your
you want
second.
to answer her question about the industries before we move to Christine?
Yes. So the industry they are how Mpumalanga, almost 95% of it is agricultural land. So how the industry are, they are not far off from where the people are living. Neither are the rural and urban areas at most instances that far apart. If that makes some sense. They're not too far apart, like for instance, where if we are looking at Sugaligwa, you just have, I'm just giving an example, 15 kilometers to town, and for instance, then another maybe just 25 kilometers, you'll go to the rural area. So they are not far off. Then you'll find, for instance, the exposure thereof, it's maybe right in between. Maybe the industrial Sasol or the mining is just maybe some 15 kilometers away from it. So that's how it is. So not necessarily that they're mostly, these industrial areas are mostly in urban or rural, but they can just be close by, depending as to where the location is. I don't know if it answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let's call in Christine. I have some more questions about the urban-rural thing, because that seems to be your biggest finding, and it seems to be quite unexpected. So, but let's go for Christine and come back to that.
Hi, Rodney. Thank you for a very interesting study. I'm glad someone's looking at asthma in young people, and what I would like to have seen is more of the effects on education. But the one thing that bugged me was the link found between physical activity and asthma prevalence. And what I'm cautious of is you saying that physical activity causes the asthma. I feel it might be more that the asthma is brought to light by the physical activity. So I'm very cautious to say that there's a causal link, but there is a relationship. I think that's what you need to talk about, the fact that there's a relationship, but there's not necessarily a causality. I don't know, Marissa, if you also want to say something on that.
I think I agree with you, because there's something called exercise-induced asthma, first of all. And then there's
Yes.
underlying asthma that would come to light in physical activity. But I think Christina's raised a very important empirical kind of derivation, which you get from your results, is to be careful how you report them by attributing causality rather than a relationship. So I think you probably have to think through very carefully which of your findings you attribute causality, and
Yes.
can you confidently say that, and which of your findings can you definitely say that or can you only say there's a causal link. I noticed sometimes you did use the language, there's a relationship between.
But I was specifically listening for the exercise one, and I didn't hear that the way it was presented made it sound like there's a cause and effect. And I think be very careful of that unless you can prove it. There are statistics, but the statistics might only prove a relationship.
Especially if it's just a correlation. But,
exactly.
I mean, he did use a chi-squared as well. But thank you for that.
That was on multiple logistic regressions, but I do get the point also. Yes, I fully received the comment.
Thanks, Rodney. It's a lot of statistics. I loved listening to the statistics. They're very, very nice.
Do you want to talk about how you did the statistics? Did you get help, or did you help yourself, or did you learn from it while somebody did it?
No, public health, I'm doing my PhD with public health. Every public health student is expected to do their own statistical analysis. So I did my own statistics. I'm proud. I've learned a lot. I'm very proud of myself. Trust me. I think in 2019 I attended a biostatistic course, and now I've also yeah, read a lot of books on data, because that's the program that I was using, and I'm still reading on how to analyze data and stuff. But this data, all of it was analyzed by myself, the interpretation and everything. I did it myself, so I'm becoming a researcher.
That's really great, because firstly, I think some people here might come running to you for some help. And Bonds is giving you applause. So that's our data person. So he's very impressed. But I know at some universities, they have like a unit that helps people with stats. And there's quite a debate that goes on about should you be allowed to outsource your statistics for a PhD, or should you do it yourself? And I think obviously first prize is you do it yourself. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And any other questions from anybody else besides Joanna and Christine? Janine, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Marisa. Thank you, Rodney, for your presentation. It gives me a kind of hint and excitement that I might also share some of also public health presentation. Rodney, we can work together. But I just graduated from my public health. I did also some studies, but this time it will be on tuberculosis. Maybe we should also present on that next in 2-3 weeks time or 4 weeks time, so that people can have the trend of how these analyses have been run by people doing public health. So I think it will make a continuation on Rodney's presentation. I'm just volunteering to present.
No, thank you for that comment, Janine. That's very interesting. Rodney, how far are you now with your PhD? Is this the results, and are you then going to start writing up?
Yeah, for phase 1, this is the first article. I'm supposed to also publish other 2 except this one. So I'm supposed to do 2 more articles. So I'm doing this and I'm doing the write-up. That is phase 1. Hopefully when COVID opens up, I'll go and do a follow-up study to follow up these children with asthma and the asthma symptoms, match them with those ones without asthma, and really look deeper into these risk factors, where we are going to be looking at their diets, we're going to be measuring the air quality, we're going to be taking their nutrition status, BMI, weight, height, and stuff, just to see, as to go into more deeper details as to what might be the actual risk factors. And
well, good luck. Any other last questions that people want to ask?
Can I make a comment, Marisa? I can't find my hand here.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Rodney, and it's nice to see your face. We haven't met yet. We have a relationship in terms of the sponsorship, with the UCDP grant. So it's really nice that you've been able to, to present here. My comment will probably address also Christine's, question indirectly on, what is the relationship to education here, because it's critical. Why are we listening, to this presentation? I'll switch off my video. I think most of you may not know, because we don't bother everybody with strategy every time, but our theme is our main strategic goal is broadening educational pathways to tertiary education, and we have 3 networks actually that we work with. 4 of them. The first network is on ECD. The second one is primary school. The third one is high school. And the fourth one is high school, university interface. So the colleagues on the, call today would be interested in the last 2 and they would not be, quite exposed to the work that we are collaborating in terms of ECD and primary school. And why should we be concerned about what happens in primary school? I think it's increasingly becoming, acknowledged that the problems that we deal with at university are actually an accumulation of educational pipeline issues. I think, we deal with extended curriculum programs, and, we don't have a very nuanced understanding of the kind of, if you take an individual, when that person was in ECD and you map out their pipeline, how could they be affected in a nuanced manner by different things? It could be health, especially nutrition. We also know that a child's brain is probably 95%, if I'm not mistaken, developed at 3 years. And as people who are doing student success, we, and interested in broadening pathways to STEM, you can almost have you can almost project in your mind the children in the country who may have an opportunity to go to STEM are not those that are going to be poorly, with poor nutrition. They are not going to be the ones that are struggling with health issues and so on. So we are not experts, I always say, in that area at the Mamelodi campus. So we are experts in the pedagogical, problems that learners have, and also when they reach university. So our interest is high school and the high school university interface. But it's important to continuously try to understand what is happening in the educational pipeline. And most of you who have been on the campus would know that we have Siatemba Clinic. We also have the psychology clinic. If you ask what those clinics are doing, they are actually working mostly with primary school and ECD children in the Mamelodi, vicinity. We were interested in Rodney's, work because, it was going to make this comparison, with the urban, rural, and we are mostly urban. And I think the results are actually quite fascinating. So I do think that the concept of student success is really being, we can't zoom into first year and not want to understand what is happening everywhere. There's even a suggestion that in a few years' time, we will be talking about student success and the impact of COVID. So the children now that are going 50% to school will be at university sooner or later, some in another 10 years, some fewer, and we may well be dealing with those gaps at university. So I thought I should just provide that context so that everybody understands why Rodney, is here. And, future presentations should be within that context of our strategy. It's a bit long, Marisa, but I hope it clarifies.
Thank you very much for your input. I think it was very relevant. I just wanted to advertise that I attended an ASAF session on a booklet that's been produced for, it's called like the basic facts of COVID. And it's written in quite an accessible way for learners. And so if you're teaching one of the subjects or one of the things connected and scientific reasoning and all that sort of thing, if you're interested in it, just send me a message and I'll send you the book. It's freely available. And I think it's got some quite nice sections. So I think we're finishing a little bit late, but let's give Rodney another virtual hand. I'll give a real one. And thank you very much, Rodney. And we look forward to hearing what happens with your studies in the future. And I hope you enjoyed this experience of interacting with us.
Thank you. Thank you.